Hi, everybody, and this is Burke Lyle, and today I'm going to do a special episode, and it's going to be different. So today, what I'm going to talk about is I'm gonna mention kind of Washington D.C. baseball. So I'm doing kind of three parts. In this video, I don't think will be terribly long, maybe 20 minutes. So I'll talk briefly about kind of the Washington Senators, and then kind of the Nationals history, and then this year's national team. So I kind of want to do a three-part series. So let's begin. So about right around 1900, the Washington Senators started. They played in Griffith Stadium, which if you look up today, Griffith Stadium is now, you know where it is. It's at the site of the Howard University Hospital, and it's basically on Georgia and Florida Avenue. I think I walked fairly close to the stadium this summer. I was on Georgia Avenue. I think it was Georgia Avenue Pentworth Metro Station I was at. I was within, I don't know exactly, within a couple miles of Griffith Stadium. So they played there for a long time. And the most notable player, Hall of Famer Walter Johnson, who won over 400 games. No one will ever come close to 400 again. Now, if you get about half of it, 200 wins as a starting pitcher, that is considered great now. And they weren't very good for most of their history. They won the World Series in 1924. They beat the New York Giants, so they won one World Series. And they went to the World Series in 1925 and 33, and that's why this year in Washington, D.C., the World Series is returning to Washington for the first time since 1933. So there's the kind of the first Senators. So they played in the 30s and 40s, and again, times were different back then. Attendance was never very good. In fact, their owner Clark Griffith, I read about, they actually during the Great Depression they actually lost profit, which now it seems unimaginable how a team would lose profits in sports. I forgot what the opposite word of profit is. Maybe I should remember that from economic class. And so that's what happened there. Is they lost profit, and then so they played in Griffith Stadium for a long time, for about 60 years, and then it came time for the new team. So they moved to Minnesota, and they're now the Minnesota Twins. So the Twins, I believe, now have kind of Washington Senators history. Believe it or not, they've been in Minnesota almost as long as they were in Washington at this point in time. It's been almost 60 years. So you have the old Minnesota. So they're so the Twins were once the old Senators. So then you had the new Senators. They moved to RFK Stadium, which is still standing. Uh, you know, and that's where the Nationals played when they first moved there. So they moved to RFK. There's kind of the new Senators, and the old Senators. I mean, maybe one day I should buy like an old Washington Senators hat, just see what it looks like. In fact, the hat I'm wearing right now, Nationals, is actually was actually the old Washington, the second Washington Senators. So they came into existence in 1961, and they were and what they were is they were new. They were a new expansion team. They moved to RFK Stadium, which is on the blue line, like blue, I think even orange and silver line of the Washington Metro, called a Stadium Armory Stop. That's where they were. They play. They were there for about 10 years. The most notable thing that Ted Williams is their manager, and then they were never very good at all. They were also in the American League. I think they had one winning season, and their attendance really wasn't that good. Certainly considered by modern standards, would have been terrible. I mean, and they only lasted really 10 years, and sure they had a few good moments. I think their most famous player, who was I think the best power of that era, Frank Howard. Some of you listeners might be familiar with that name. Many of you may not, especially if you're older. I think maybe the parent generation would probably know more about him, or even the grandparent generation right now. So that was kind of the Senators. I believe they had an all-star game there as well. I think it was in 1969, and then after 1971 they moved. So for 30 years, 33 summers, from 72 to 2004, there's no baseball in Washington, D.C. at all. I guess the nearest team would be considered kind of the Orioles. Since the Orioles were about, I don't know, it's an hour drive or an hour train ride. It's a very quick Amtrak or MARC ride from Union Station to Baltimore Penn Station. So at that time, I think there's some close calls. In fact, I don't know where it is. I used to have this picture book when I was a kid of kind of the history of RFK Stadium, baseball there, from the time the Senators were there to even the Nationals. So there was no baseball for the for the longest time there. I think there's some close calls since I know there's expansion in the 90s, and I think went to Colorado and in Florida, the Marlins, and then I think there was the D-backs and Rays, so they lost out on expansion. One thing I didn't know, reading about it today, is I think the Twins considered actually maybe even potentially moving back since they didn't like the Metrodome anymore, since they obviously now have Target Field. They considered moving back to Washington, D.C., which that would have been pretty ironic. So fast forward, there's the Expos who played in Montreal Olympic Stadium for years, and their attendance was terrible. And for the most part, they're not very good. They did not make. I think they're kind of losing money. You know, Montreal, great hockey town, not known for baseball at all. And they had a lot of good players for sure. I mean, you had Pedro Martinez, for one of the greatest pitchers ever of this recent era. I think they Vladimir Guerrero, another example. So they had a lot of talent, but they just never could quite put it together. Oh, Andre Dawson was in the Hall of Fame. They had him. Tim Raines was just in the Hall of Fame. So they had a numerous amount of Hall of Famers. Certainly All-Stars for sure, but it didn't work out. The 1994 strike may have been what hurt baseball in Montreal. So the Expos, they considered relocating, and they moved to Washington, D.C., and many people thought they'd be called the Senators. Of course, I think the Rangers and the Twins own history rights. And in fact, I was reading about the Senators. Both Senators, I read about them on Saber, and I also Wikipedia. And if you go to Wikipedia page, the old Washington Senators, the second Washington Senators, not the ones that became the Twins, but the ones that became the Rangers, who are now the Texas Rangers. There is very little information about it. They're just a small footnote in kind of Rangers history. There's really not much to talk about, as I said. But so, anyways, the Expos came to the Nationals, and the reason why they became the Nationals, they thought about Senators. That didn't work out, and when they first started there, they played in RFK Stadium, which again for years the Redskins played there for years before they moved out to Landover, FedEx Field, a few metro stops away on the blue line, and then DC United, which I don't care much for soccer at all, to be honest. That's the first time I ever mentioned the word I think soccer at all in this video series. They played there for many, many years until they moved out right near Nationals Park, Audi Field, I think in the Green Line kind of waterfront Navy Yard area, kind of southwest Washington. So then you had the Nationals came in, and their history. They moved there. They started there in 2005, which I was very young then. I don't remember them. I was in kindergarten at the time, so I was 14 pretty soon, going on 15 years. So they came, and they played in RFK for 3 years. They drew very well their first year. Ryan Zimmerman, if you think about him, he was drafted that first year. He played college baseball that season, debuted that September. So he played there that year. Other notable players, there really weren't any besides really Ryan Zimmerman. I guess one player they had Alfonso Soriano, who, I think he's remembered most for probably he was on those Yankees teams of the early 2000s, a 40-40 type hitter. Had a 40-40 season for the Nationals before he went on to the Cubs. That was their best season. Had one of the great seasons in MLB history there. I think if I had to say a pitcher, I'd say Livan Hernandez, who Braves fans, this will make you very painful. 1997 League Championship Series, striking out 15. The Eric Gregg game. I mean, watch the video. That there's pitches that are literally 2 feet outside, a foot outside. That's called a strike. Worst home plate umpire performance you'll ever seen. So they had him. He was very successful there for a few years, and then kind of went back to on those Nationals Park teams, early National Park days. So that was probably their most famous pitcher they had, but they really weren't very good in RFK. Really, what the vision is to really build towards Nationals Park, and then they finally bottomed out when they moved to Nationals Park. They're really bad, and you talk about where it is. So Nationals Park, it's located on the Green Line of the Washington Metro. It's kind of in southwest Washington, right near the Anacostia River. So that opened in 2008, and obviously Ryan Zimmerman hit the home run that opened that ballpark. Hit a walk-off home run. So he's the only player remaining from those early Nationals Park days, and they were not very good when they moved in. They lost 100 games both years, which of course led to drafting of Steven Strasburg. If you think about when Steven Strasburg made his debut, which next June 8th will be the 10-year anniversary, believe it or not, he was there really that was the most exciting moment in Nationals history at the time. When he came up, there was a sellout, his postseason atmosphere. I mean, all those great playoff games in Nationals Park over the years, and of course the World Series will be played there at the very least this Saturday, or this Friday and Saturday, the 25th and 26th. Well, at the time, that was their biggest moment. Like, that was probably Nationals Park's biggest moment, other than those Ryan Zimmerman walk-off home runs in the early days and opening the ballpark. I mean, that was it. So that was one of their best. And Strasburg was a huge deal at Nationals Park that year. He went on to have Tommy John surgery, so they improved. By the time Strasburg came up, they improved. In comes Bryce Harper. That kind of really changes everything. Kind of 2012 was really the year they first make it to the playoffs. I mean, that year Strasburg emerged as a full-time starter. You had Jordan Zimmerman starting to emerge that year. Ryan Zimmerman, who obviously was their best player in the early Nationals Park years. Ian Desmond started to emerge as kind of perennial 2020 type player, and still is to this day, not as a shortstop, but as an outfielder. In Colorado, no longer there, but that was kind of their team. That was kind of their first team. And think about this free agent signing of Jason Worth. That was in the fall of 2010. I mean, he was on those Phillies teams that, a decade ago. You can say, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. The Phillies were the franchise to be in baseball. They had just won the World Series, lost in the World Series, and they had, if you think about any baseball team from 2008 to 2010, most success you wanted to be the Phillies. And Jason Worth changed the culture there. They went from being bad for many years. Again, when he got there, they lost 90 games. I think it was maybe 4 or even 5 years in a row. Maybe they just missed 90 losses. Either way, they're bad. They're bad. They only hit 500 once. And Worth just completely changed the culture there. Everything changed. Before that, they were nowhere close to the playoffs. Now they've been in the playoffs 5 times since he's gotten there, and now, of course, they're in the World Series. So, in comes Worth. That completely changes everything. You think about some of those players they had on the or other early days in Nationals Park. Some of you who went on to be a huge part of that Brewers team until they lost to the Cardinals team that went on to win the World Series that same year, 2011. Nigel Morgan, he was kind of fun to watch. Stole a lot of bases. Had almost no power. I don't think you'd see any players like that today, really. Almost no power, stealing bases. Home runs so emphasized, and stolen bases not considered that big of a deal at all. That was a fun player they had. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, that Adam Dunn, who many of you might remember him. Some of you might be too young. Was probably the best power hitter of this recent generation of baseball. So you had moments like that, and then so that 12 years were the first thing. They lost to the Cardinals, so their season ended much earlier than expected. They had a very disappointing ending to that season. Lost to the Cardinals in 5 games, which I'm gonna be honest, I was devastated at the time. I probably cried for a couple hours when I went to bed that night. I mean, it was really that bad. It was one of the worst losses I've probably ever endured as a Nationals fan, and really most emotional by far in a negative way. So you had those. So you had that team, and in 2014 they came back, and then that year they won the division again. You had Strasburg, Jordan Zimmerman, once again leading the rotation. I'm trying to think the best player that year. Rendon came up. He was drafted kind of in those early Nationals Park years. He was not quite a rookie, but he really had his first great year. That was kind of when he was coming in, before he became one of the best players in the National League, one of the best pure hitters and defensive third baseman in baseball, second best third baseman probably in baseball in the last 5 years behind only Nolan Arenado. They're probably 1 and 2 of most productive third basemen in that time. So that year, and that was a playoff run again. I got excited once again, and they lost to the Giants, who went on to win their 3rd World Series in 4 years. Game 1 was a bad loss. Game 2 was even worse. They blew a ninth inning lead. They denied Jordan Zimmermann the opportunity to get a shutout. They went to Drew Storen, and the game ended up going 18 innings, and they lost to the Giants. Bryce Harper was huge that series. So fast forward a year later, in comes Max Scherzer. They're spending money, and of course now the expectations are sky high to win the World Series, to go to the World Series. So the expectations that the Nationals had kind of in the middle of the decade, what this year was is what people envisioned would happen, say, in 2012, 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That is what people expected to happen many times before this. And if I were to ask you in 2012, would the Washington Nationals, or even 2014, would the Washington Nationals have to wait? You won't see the Nationals in the World Series until 2019. Would I have been surprised when I heard that? Probably not, no. I would have thought they'd surely go to the World Series before 2019. Well, that was not the case. That was not the case. So they lost the series to... So then in came Scherzer, which that was the best free agent signing. I mean, the no-hitter against the Pirates, then another one against the Mets. He's put the 20 strikeout game. You know, I've watched him so many times the last 5 years, putting together a masterpiece. You know, double-digit strikeout games. Best pitcher of this era. Certainly the last 5 years, won 2 Cy Young Awards. That was a great signing. Yet that year, their expectations were so high, they missed the playoff. There's that upstart Mets team that went to the World Series that year, too. So, again, another magical team. Bryce Harper won the MVP that year. And with Bryce Harper, at the time when he won the MVP, they thought, since he was 22 years old, he was only going to get better and better from that point. He'd win multiple MVPs. And he basically, and remember there was the argument of Harper Trout since they came up at the same time. That's when you could really make a debate right there. Now, it's not a debate anymore. Trout's one of the greatest players ever. Harper, probably a Hall of Famer too. Great too. But not one of the greatest players ever. So again, at the time, that season Harper had really a great season. I think he nearly won the batting title at 42 home runs, winning the MVP. That was a magical year. That team had so many great moments, yet they didn't even make it to the playoffs. That was a very disappointing team. I think they had a lot of injuries that year. 16 was better. Scherzer won the Cy Young that year. Harper, it's kind of funny. Harper was not quite the same. I think Rendon had a good year that year too. I think it was also the first year Posty and Desmond. There was a lot of fun moments that year too, especially offensively. Obviously, many great Scherzer pitching performances. Yet that year they lost to the Dodgers in another Game 5. Scherzer gave up the home run in the 7th inning in a Game 5. I think they had a chance to wrap up that series. Another fun player that year, Daniel Murphy, who in his 3 years in Washington, he was so much fun to watch. You know, he was kind of a pure, professional hitter, if you've heard that term. Someone who hit for a high average, is capable of hitting with batting title type average. Could hit 20, 25 home runs, hit a bunch of doubles. Lefty, hardly ever struck out. He was so much fun to watch. You just don't see enough hitters like Daniel Murphy. So he was a lot of fun to watch in those 3 years, yet they never won the World Series. That was too bad. He's called Daniel Hits Murphy by F.P. Santangelo. And that was really a fun year. You know, by the way, they had Dusty Baker. So managers they had, I should have mentioned that. So Davey Johnson was the manager in 2012. It was kind of old then. We knew he was going to retire soon. So then became Matt Williams. Lost the team, lost the clubhouse. That's why he was fired, failing to meet expectations in 2015. Then in came Dusty Baker. So 17, that was a fun year. That was a year where I could really relax all summer. You know, because I knew the division was over since that was the Braves. The first year they moved into SunTrust Park. You know, they were still irrelevant then. They were not ready to succeed yet. The Mets were disappointing as always that year too. The Phillies were awful. And the Marlins, the last year of Giancarlo, Yelich, and Ozuna, they were probably the biggest threat to them, and that threat probably ended pretty much all but ended by September. That was a fun summer. Bryce Harper looked like he was well on his way to winning the MVP. You had the 4 straight home run game against the Brewers. That was remarkable. Ryan Zimmerman had a magical year, kind of throwback of what he had in those RFK and early Nationals Park years. And that was also the year Bryce Harper very nearly blew out his knee. That was very disappointing at the time. He was well on his way to winning another MVP. That was just a fun year. Scherzer won another Cy Young. Strasburg was as great as ever that year. really was just dominant down the stretch. Might have won the Cy Young Award if he hadn't gone on the DL for a short period of time there either. So that was a fun team, and I thought that team was going to win the World Series. They won 97 games, played against the Cubs, and you saw those moments. That Bryce Harper game 2 home run tied the game. Zimmerman going 3 home run. That was very exciting at the time and thrilling. Yet that Game 4 momentum, winning Game 4 in Chicago, Game 4 back in Washington, just all unraveled right then and there. Just a very poorly played game, really on both sides. It was a slugfest that they ended up winning. That was a very disappointing ending. Since I thought that team would be the team that would win the World Series. That was a bad ending. That's the last time Bryce Harper ever played in the playoff game with the Nationals. We didn't know at the time. And that was it. In comes Davey Martinez, 2018. Was very disappointing as well. They finished 500. It was just a very strange year. Daniel Murphy was hurt for the first 2 months. Couldn't even get him on the field. Bryce Harper was very inconsistent. Had some great moments. At times you thought, he's Barry Bonds. This is how great Harper is. And that is true. Harper is a very streaky player, but you're always afraid of him. Since he's going to have a high walk rate, you always have to be careful of Harper, whether he's hot or not, since you never know when he's going to hit a home run or he's going to do damage. So Harper was very inconsistent that year. There's all, there's all the moments that happened that year where he, failed to run out a ground ball, or moments like that in Queens, or Scherzer was obviously spectacular. Struck out 300 batters that year. It was also the debut of Juan Soto, where Soto had a magical rookie year, came in second MVP voting. There's some fun moments that year, especially really in the first half. Obviously, the same time that year was in June of 2018. The Capitals won the Stanley Cup. So it was supposed to be a magical summer in Washington. First, the Caps got jump-started, and the Nationals, but played so well that month of May. Things were looking so promising that year, and then things just really fell apart. They played really poorly in June. I could go on 10 minutes talking about their struggles of 2018, but I'm not going to. Things went down until in June, July, and I kept thinking, I wonder if this team is going to get going. I wonder if they're just going to get hot, get it going, win the division, and maybe this year they'll make a deep playoff run. That never happened. They never got going, and it was over. It was a frustrating summer for sure. There's some good moments, but also some very disappointing moments. And 2018 was kind of the end of an era. Harper ended up playing his last year in Washington that year. Gone was Gio Gonzalez, who won 20 games in 2012 on that first team that jump-started everything. Just going back to that. And really, gone was Gio left. I know it was an important part. Oh yeah, Worth left after 2017. So guys who were there in those early eras, that era kind of all ended, and everything just changed. In 2019, maybe that would be the magical year, and it just turned out not to be by Memorial Day. And talking about the 2019 Nationals, so things were different. No longer did you have Bryce Harper. I just mentioned that was probably the biggest change. It was just a new team, new players. Obviously, replacing Gio Gonzalez was Patrick Corbin, and this team went on this team really in 19 never really looked promising at first. They kind of played 500 kind of April, and then not only to say that, on April 24th when they're in Colorado, the Washington Capitals Stanley Cup run ended. So right then and there I knew whatever happened with the Capitals in that magical 2018 run, that was so much fun. That just never happened. I knew that would be different. So the Nationals, you wonder what they could do over the next 104 games. Well, things got bad and worse. Things started to get bad in May when they lost 3 out of 4 to the Cardinals. They just kept getting worse and worse. Playing the Mets, we freaked out that they won a series in mid-May. Then right before Memorial Day, went to Queens. Things bottomed out there, and people were saying fire Davey. People were saying trade Max Scherzer, trade Anthony Rendon. Trade the whole team. rebuild, start over. And I had those thoughts too. I couldn't help but think, wow. So then I finally know what it's like to lose as a Nationals fan. Because my early years as a Nationals fan, kind of when the Nationals Park opened when I was just a kid, middle school age, elementary school age, they were really bad. And it wasn't until middle school that they got good, that magical summer of 2012. And I thought all that happened in the last 7 years could be over. And just right now, it's just about losing now. That's what I thought it was going to be. And I thought, well, it's going to be a long summer. Maybe they'll turn it around. Maybe this year will be like last year. They're going to miss the playoffs. I wonder who the next manager will be. I had those thoughts for sure. But Davey Martinez at the same time was not worried. And I found out Ted Lerner, the owners, reading what they said in a comment, I forgot where it was from, but they said they never even considered firing Davey Martinez. They never even thought about it. So there you go. They're a lot more loyal than what the fans might have been or what the national media was saying. And they got hot. Things started to turn around by Memorial Day. Early June, things started to turn around. That Trey Turner walk-off home run. And really June, that series, Max Scherzer black eye game. That was one of the most remarkable Nationals games that you'll ever see. And then Scherzer was looking like a Cy Young Award winner. And then all of a sudden, his back starts flaring up right when they're in the middle of the pennant race. You're thinking, oh no, please don't miss the playoffs since Max Scherzer couldn't pitch. And they didn't. So they got hot by the end of June. June was a hot month for them. They were back in it. By 4th of July, they were right in the wild card race. And things went well in July. Trey Turner hitting for the cycle against the Rockies. So you had those fun moments again. It was fun watching Nationals baseball again. August was a good month too. They won a fair amount. They won a lot in August, and then it looked like they're all but certain going to the playoffs. They were red hot, and then they kind of fade a little bit in September. They play kind of poorly, and things all of a sudden look like, oh no, please don't miss the playoffs. After all this, after all you overcome, please don't miss the playoffs. I was pretty nervous then. And then the last weekend of the regular season, they just got hot. They won 5 again. They had a 5-game sweep against the Phillies, and they swept the Indians in the season. They won 8 games, so they just got hot. They won 93 games, and they clinched a wild card spot. So the regular season moments, shout-outs you want to give to for their regular season contributions. How about a shout-out to Juan Soto, who at 34 home runs is a 20-year-old. A 20-year-old. Came up at 19. I'll never forget his 19 season. How about hitting all those home runs he hit, including those 2 home runs he hit at Yankee Stadium as a 19-year-old. That was fun, just against the Yankees in their stadium. Or that upper deck shot against the Yankees on June 18th of 2018. That was a lot of fun. All those moments Soto has provided the last 2 years are so much fun to watch. He's one of my favorite players in baseball. Just by the way he plays. A 20-year-old, loves the game. Victor Robles, 21. They're best friends. Robles, who has a great arm, great speed, may win a Gold Glove in center field, might be a potential 5-tool player. He has the power. He might be a 30-30 type player. You never know. They'll be in the outfield for years to come. Fun moments. Guys who enjoyed watching the last 5 years. Trey Turner, who steals a bunch of bases. I think he's capable of stealing 70 or 80 if he can just somehow play a full season, just run, stay healthy. He was a lot of fun to watch in 16 and 17. How about Howie Kendrick with 344 in the regular season? All those playoff moments. NLCS MVP. Scherzer coming back in the form. Strasburg staying healthy for a full year and becoming one of the better pitchers in the National League, winning 18 games, striking out well over 200. All those players in the regular season. So there's a lot of fun regular season moments. In the wild card game, it appeared it could be all over once again. I remember on October 1st, all the excitement, getting fired up for the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they're just against the Brewers. It could have ended. Josh Hader comes in. It's 3-0 or 3-1 when he comes in. Soto's up with the bases loaded. And remember earlier that Ryan Zimmerman broken bat swing that extended the inning. Their season could have ended right then and there. Could have been all over. Could have been, you know what? It was a great season. It was a great run. They came back. You got to see playoff baseball in Washington, something they thought was very unlikely come Memorial Day. And you know what? They won that game. against the Dodgers. Favorite moments of Game 2. Kind of recapping that playoff run when they won Game 2. Strasburg start, Scherzer coming in the 8th inning, striking out the side as the setup man. Daniel Hudson, bases loaded, somehow figuring how to get out of the jam. To then Game 4, that Ryan Zimmerman home run. That was probably the best moment of Game 4 in Washington. And Scherzer going 7 innings, being nails. And then how about finally Game 3, Soto and Rendon back-to-back home runs to then tie the game, or Rendon and Soto reverse order. To then that Howie Kendrick grand slam beating LA. That was fun. I was celebrating that. NLCS, how about Sanchez 7 innings, 7 2/3, nearly pitching a no-hitter. How about Scherzer striking out 11 and 7, Strasburg striking out 12 and 7 against the Cardinals. To then Corbin striking out 12, including I think 5 out of the first 6 striking out the side. Pure dominance in Game 4. To then NLCS heroes Howie Kendrick, who I think get 2 doubles and 3 RBIs in Game 5 and drove in another run in Game 1. How about Michael A. Taylor hitting a home run in Game 2 against the Cardinals that proved to be the difference? Or Zimmerman coming through that 7-run first inning. I think Soto hit a double. I think Yan Gomes hit a 2-run double. I think Trey Turner came up again and hit a 2-run single. So all those moments in Game 4, to the Nationals winning the pennant and going to the World Series. Just all those playoff moments were just so much fun to watch, to enjoy, to be a part of, to see that. And all those years of frustration of this team coming into the district, to those bad years at Nationals Park, to last year, which all those other moments, like 2015 and 18, I think were similar years. Sky high expectations to win the World Series. So many fun moments in the regular season, yet at the end of the day, they're a 500 team that missed the playoffs, that just couldn't get it right. Those disappointing teams, or those playoff exits. To this year, this team's different. You know what? They could have lost to the Brewers in the wild card game. They could have lost to the Brewers or to the Dodgers in Game 5. Maybe they should have. And then sweeping the Cardinals, a team that had just scored 13 runs, including 10 runs in the first inning against Atlanta. I think they scored, 0, 1, 1, 2 runs in the first 3 games against the Nationals. So you have all those moments right, shutting them down. This team is different. A team that was 18 and 30. People said they're done on Memorial Day. They're not going to the playoffs. Their season's over. There's nothing to play for. This team is in the World Series. And just the history of this team, all those fun moments over the years, and I think there'll be many more seasons of Nationals baseball. You know, the 2010s coming into the decade is one of the worst franchises in baseball. They're drafting Bryce Harper and the debut of Strasburg that same very year of 2010. It's just been a great decade of Nationals baseball, and it's going to end by them playing in the World Series. Win or lose, it's going to be a magical season that I'll never forget. Always look back. So like I said, just like with the Capitals in 2018, I'm going to try to just soak in these moments in the World Series the next few days. Even if they lose, I will still just look back at this year, since who knows what the 2020s will bring. Who knows if and when they go back to the World Series. So let's just enjoy this now, since Washington, D.C. has a baseball team in the World Series, and it's the Washington Nationals, and I'm proud of this team for what they accomplished. And tomorrow, it's going to all begin. The World Series, I'm recording this on the eve of the World Series. It's going to be fun to watch the World Series tomorrow, and in Houston, to when it comes back in Washington. So however how it goes, I'll do a World Series show. I'll try very hard to get that in tomorrow. Preview show, I'll try to let out the biased stuff of being a fan. I'll just try to analyze it, but just for now, I just want to enjoy these moments of the Nationals in the World Series. And hopefully they win a World Series and we can celebrate the World Series all winter. Have that to celebrate throughout the winter, say Thanksgiving, the holiday season of December, New Year's, even into spring training. Since you know what? The moment that it all ends, it's disappointing. So just magical season. Can't wait to see what happens. Hopefully the Nationals are world champions. So thank you for listening to this episode. I basically talked about baseball in DC. So thank you. Hopefully the Nationals are 2019 world champions in closing.